Hi everyone. Today we've got the amazing Jennah-Louise. We talk about things of self-exploration, overcoming your inner self, the challenges you might set, and how you can build to be a better person. She's a life coach. She's got plenty of great stories. If you want to reach out to her, you can check her out on her Insta. It's Jennah_Louise. That's JENNAH_Louise, LOUISE. There's also links to her website there if you want to check her out and reach out. She'd be more than happy to have a chat. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoy. Please welcome the incredible Jennah-Louise.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. How are you today?
I'm excellent. I will admit I'm a little sleep deprived. It's only been a couple of days since I sort of completed my last adventure. So bear
Yeah,
with me. Words scramble a little bit, but I'm very grateful to be here.
we're grateful for having you. But I guess to kick us straight off, tell us about that. The Himam Ultra, right? 2 days
Yeah.
ago or
So
something?
yeah, I finished it 2 days ago. So
Wow.
yeah, this was an amazing one. This was certainly the biggest adventure or I guess endurance experience that I've put myself to the test with. It was something that I didn't actually genuinely know if I would finish. It's not me being
Yeah,
humble. I actually
sure.
didn't know. I get very excited about these sorts of things because I know I'm big on self-exploration. And I feel like when we take on these challenges that we don't know whether we're able to finish or not, we learn a lot about ourselves.
Mm,
And so this particular one was held in Oman in the Hajar Mountains. It's a 114-kilometer ultra marathon with 5,700 meters elevation gain and loss.
wow. Yeah, wow.
I have a cutoff time of 32 hours, and it is labeled as one of the most technical ultra marathons in the world. It has a not finish rate of almost 50%. So almost
Wow.
50% of the start do not finish.
Yeah.
And so obviously these statistics going into something like this can be pretty intimidating.
Mm,
Um, Fortunate over the years with other things that I've experienced, I've really sort of reframed my mindset in terms of these adventures and kind of made sure that no matter how I go in, I win, whether I get across that finish line or not. I know that I've put myself to the test, I've tried my best, and I'm going to come out on top because I'm going to learn a lot more about myself and either going to expand my potential or meet my limits for the day, but either way, going to feel very fulfilled in what I do.
yeah, that's awesome. I think
Yeah.
that's as cheesy as it is. That's it, right? It's the journey. Well, everything's a lesson to be learned, whether you finish or not. Yeah, and the goalposts are constantly changing. And a challenge like that, anything could happen, which is out of your control. But you know,
Yeah. Well, what I found really helpful in this one was framing it as an adventure. I found when I was
hmm
framing it as a marathon, it felt more difficult, and it felt more difficult to be able to pare it into pieces to be able to sort of like get it done. And I found when I framed it as an adventure, it was like I think there was about 16 checkpoints, and it was like checkpoint to checkpoint was going to be a new part of this adventure.
yeah,
And so with an adventure, I had the expectation that things will go wrong because they always
yeah,
do in marathon running, an endurance sport. No matter how much you plan, how much strategy you have, things go out the window.
mm,
And so there was less surprise, disappointment when things were not going to plan. And if anything, that kind of created a bit more of an excitement around these things because I was like, okay, this is part of the adventure. This is part of learning more about who I am, what I'm capable of, and being able to learn more lessons of resilience in being able to bring these back into everyday life.
yeah. Of course, that's pretty awesome. What was one of the hardest things on the run?
I would say I got a little bout of, I don't know if it was food poisoning or water poisoning, but it was a very similar gurgle to what I had got in my previous adventure. Actually, earlier in January, I did the 3 passes in Everest Base Camp in Nepal, and I got water poisoning, and it was that same gurgle. And then all of a sudden, yeah, that affected me for about 6 to 7 hours at nighttime. And
Yeah.
before going into the run, I'd spoken to some people that had completed it, and they said, make sure you're not alone at night.
Uh-huh.
It's scary. It's a lot more difficult, obviously. And I found myself alone all night with
Mm,
a bit of an upset stomach. So Yeah, I'd say that was one of the more challenging things, was being able to keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep moving forward, keep going from checkpoint to checkpoint, because, you know, as the night goes on, they start fires so people can keep warm and things like
Yeah.
this. So it takes a lot of inner strength to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to go back into the cold on my own
Yeah.
self. So that was difficult. And I would say the other one was I got lost for about 25 minutes, half an hour. Apparently, some of the flags had been sort of picked up and taken away by maybe village kids or something like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was difficult in the morning because on such a big event, you know, an extra step
Oh,
is a lot
yeah.
less sort of, you know, tracking yourself like that and trying to find your way. And you're already very mentally tired as well. So, yeah, that was another difficult point. But again, when I come back to framing it as an adventure, it's part of it. It's part of the
Yes,
fun.
for
And
sure.
everything that when you get over that line, you can reflect back on and be like, okay, that was, you know, it wasn't so bad in hindsight.
Yeah. So it's 114. What did you end up doing? 120 or something?
Yeah. Not too, I wasn't moving that quick.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It wasn't too bad. I went up quite a substantial hill and then went back down. And then I actually had to wait for the people behind me. So I
Hmm.
actually ended up standing there for quite a while, just waiting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
came up where I could be like, hey, do you guys know where to go? Because my watch had actually ran out of battery.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so that was what I had to do. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. These
Crazy.
things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell me, like, it's 32 hours, you said, is the cutoff.
At all. Yes.
Do you have time to sleep? Like, how do you recover? Like,
So,
it's just,
well, I mean, it depends how quick you go. And this is
hmm
something that I am personally reflecting on right now, is part of me reframing something like this as an adventure means that I have a list of things that are a priority that aren't only speed and performance. Part of this adventure is being able to connect with people along the way. It's about being able to be present in conversation and story with them. Slowing down if someone needs help or you feel like they need a bit of a pep up. So with this sort of thing, I found that even though I was unsure whether I could make the 32 hours, there was something that was so valuable to me in not only focusing on the time, but also the present experience.
mm,
And so I was fortunate enough to just get in the nick of time without
yeah,
sleeping. I didn't sleep, which luckily I didn't because I probably wouldn't have made it.
sure.
Um, but it was interesting because it had me reflect when I crossed the finish line as to where I go from here as I begin to get more and more into this endurance sport. You know, the why begins to change. And I'm still reflecting on where I land in terms of, you know, do I care about the number that I am when I cross the line? Or do I care about the experiences that I have along the way that I feel like possibly I quite miss out on if I only focus on
Hmm.
speed? So that's been a really interesting reflection for me. So fortunately, I was able to do both. I made the cutoff
Yeah,
time and I was
yeah.
able to those beautiful experiences. Like one guy I remember kind of came up behind me at nighttime just briefly, and he's like, "Hey, you should look up." And you know, when you're at nighttime, you got the torch and you're looking down, and because it's so rocky in this terrain and technical, you're hardly looking anywhere but your feet. And
Hmm.
I stopped, looked up, and it was the clearest of sky and I could just see everything when you're a
Yeah.
child, parents point, and they're like, look at that, and look at that, and look at that. You could see everything. And I was like, wow. And I said to him, I was like, thank you. Thank you
Mm,
for reminding me that, you know, it's not only about moving forward, but it's about being able to pause as well. And so, yeah, I feel like that's a beautiful lesson. And possibly for people that um, don't identify as endurance athletes or think that they can't perform highly in something, is to remind people that in reflection of my own experience, you don't have to always start out as wanting to be the best. It
hmm.
can purely be something that you go into because you're wanting to be stripped away from everything that clouds your own sense of judgment and be able to meet yourself in a way that you can only meet yourself when everything's stripped bare. And for
Mm,
me, I find out who I truly am and what I'm truly capable of in moments like these, despite whether I perform in the top 3 or not, this is the reward. This is the trophy that I get. And I feel like that's really important in my personal journey as a message to share, is that if you get overwhelmed by the idea of performance, just slow down and think of it as an adventure and a journey of self-exploration in which you can get to know yourself on a deeper level and begin to be able to explore on a more serious level of what you're capable of, with you versus you.
Yeah, that's pretty wise. I like it. I'm doing the challenge, the Run to Remember challenge this month, and my partner's, neither of us are very physical, to be honest. And she said to me, I was really not in the mood the other day. I came down from putting us under bed, and I went, I really don't want to do it. She's like, just don't do it. And I was like, no, it's not about that. Like, I haven't set myself a goal each day. I've just said I'll just do it every day. Just get out there. And something rings in my head of Dad when he was kind of training was, you don't always want to do it, but once you put your shoes on, you're committed and you just start. And that's it. I said, I don't really know what I'm going to experience through this. I've never run ever this much in my life, and I don't know, but the journey itself is, like you said, there's parts of the runs that I'm doing where I see parts of my little area that I haven't seen before or appreciate. And yeah, it's like that kind of stop and smell the roses feeling of, I'm out here, I'm doing something nice, but it's also clear, like I feel a bit sometimes selfish to find time for myself, and this is a bigger cause. But yeah, like it's a nice little journey on its own. It's not necessarily about the run, it's seeing what's in me, I guess.
Absolutely. And I feel like in terms of that sense of selfishness, it's like expand your perspective in thinking, well, what is selfish? Is selfish you taking time for yourself to create you as more of an authentic version of you, a more powerful version of you, and I would assume a better and healthier dad,
Yeah,
than to
yeah.
maybe have an extra few minutes with your children or something, right? So it's like it's also about the quality of time that's spent over the quantity. And so I feel like you being able to put on your shoes and get out there, like your dad said, is definitely the best advice for you to be able to grow into like a larger sense of iteration of yourself.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. um, Now, out of all your adventures, do you have a favorite? Was this the favorite because it was the biggest, I guess, or just is there something else?
I love all of them.
Yeah.
Like something, there's a pattern that just came to my mind that I'd like to share when I think of them, especially this year. This year has been a slower year for me. I'm normally someone that's, I had a podcast. I was always doing podcasting. I really slowed down this year and focused on myself. And I really went into this state of more of an intuitive trust and guidance in my life versus me having to feel like I need to control everything and prove my. And throughout these experiences, so in January of this year, I did the 3 passes in Everest Base Camp in Nepal. In September, I did Mera Peak, which is almost 6,500 meters high in Nepal. And then, yeah, in December, I've done this ultra marathon. And I feel like what I learned through those 3 this year, which are probably possibly my favorite 3, is that when things began to get out of control, so to speak, in these adventures and endurance feats, as they always do, I had a larger and deeper sense of trust in why things were changing or becoming different to what I expected. And particularly with Mera Peak, I got up to about 5,000 meters before you go to base camp and then high camp and then you summit. And when I got there, overnight, snow had happened, the most snow in 8 years. And so it snowed us in.
Wow.
And I got snowed in for quite a few days. No reception or anything, just kind of sitting there waiting. And about the 4th or 5th day, everyone decided that, let's give it a go. It stopped snowing, but there was still a lot of snow. The path was hidden. And we all went, and I would say there was probably about 100 of us. Like, there was participants, there were Sherpas, there were guides, everyone was getting amongst it because we'd all been snowed in. Long story short, we didn't make it that day. We got to base camp and realized it was just not going to be, the time was too short for us to make it up to high camp.
Right.
Turned around. That afternoon, I would say 90% of the people chose to turn around and go back the next day. And in the tea house, I could hear all these different conversations, people from different countries and nationalities and languages, and they were all saying like, it's impossible. Let's go down. This is a waste of time. It's dangerous, etc. And I was fortunate enough to be sitting next to two German guys that I heard them say, well, we think it's possible. And I remember sitting there in between two different discussions and points of view and thinking, I'm going to go with them.
Mm.
And what ended up happening is we went the next day. There were hardly any of us. We made it up to high camp, had 4 hours sleep. And then I think at about 1 a.m., we started summiting to Mera Peak. And it was brutally cold. Within the first hour, I was nauseous. I was hallucinating. I felt I was going to throw up. I just wanted to sleep on the ground. Like everything was kind of not going well. And I remember I thought, I don't think I'm going to make this. And I was so fortunate because the endurance feats that I'd done before then had taught me that things ebb and flow, and the state that I feel now can change. And so I sent it in, I breathed, I had water, I had sugar, and I realigned with myself. And I said to my guide, what we're going to do, or my Sherpa, is we're going to go left. I had poles. I said, we're going to go left, right, breathe, and then go again.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
cool.
when that high altitude, you're not going quick.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I had said that, we went from middle of the pack to back of the pack. I could hardly see the torches in the distance. And there was a moment there of ego where I felt embarrassed. I was like, wow, we're so far behind. You know, who do I think I am? All these inner critics.
Sure.
But I recentered. And so we got in this synchronous flow and we started doing this like left, right, breathe and go again. We passed everyone. We ended up getting to the base of the summit about 10-15 minutes before anyone else. We had it all to ourselves. We summited first.
Wow.
And it was the most exceptional experience, honestly, Lockie. It was just the sunrise was perfect. It was clear as anything. The Everest, you could see all the peaks. And I remember standing there, being the first ones up there and thinking, I'm so grateful that in that moment I was able to trust myself, but also trust that these challenging moments were here to serve me a greater purpose. And that when I relinquished that sense of control and had some deeper sense of faith, the outcome was way better than I ever expected. And so I feel like even with this ultra, there were moments where there was one moment where I felt very divinely guided, where I was, after I had felt not well, it was probably about 5 a.m, walking by myself, and this guy almost sped past me. And he said, you better hurry up. You might miss the cutoff time, because there were certain cutoff times throughout the run.
Yeah.
And I said to him, oh my gosh, I forgot that there was one upcoming. I was thinking the next one was just the last one. And he said to me, well, you got to go. You got to go. And there was a bit called the abandoned village, and everyone had told me, lots of people get lost there, and it's very scary. And I remember all night thinking, oh my gosh, the abandoned village, I'm going to do it on my own. And in this moment, when he came up to me, we went through the abandoned village in like 20 seconds. He knew where to go, and he said, you got to go to the next checkpoint before this time. And then that was it. Like that was our experience together. And in that moment, I realized if he had not come, one, I would have probably got lost in the abandoned village and I would have been petrified.
Yeah.
And two, I would have not been able to finish. I would have got DNF'd at the following, it wasn't the next checkpoint, but the checkpoint after, because I just wasn't moving quick enough.
Yeah.
I had to run 7 kilometers, like sprint about 7
Yeah, wow.
kilometers. Yeah, it was a big one. But those moments for me, Lockie, were the pattern that I'm speaking to is this. I think there's 2 things. One is this deep sense of faith and trust that when you really relinquish that sense of control, synchronicities happen that enabled you to have a more beautiful outcome than you could ever imagine. And 2, over the course of these different endurance feats, you begin to learn lessons that you deeply integrate. And on Mera Peak, when I wanted to give up, if I hadn't had those previous experiences, I would have went back down. And that would have been my story. And then because that was my story, possibly the next time I would have done the same thing. So it was just cool to be able to recognize that because I'd had those previous experiences in that moment, I was able to understand that I just had to give myself a minute. And then through doing certain things, I was able to continue on. And I think those are the two most important things. So not necessarily favorite adventures as one singular thing, but it's the experiences and the potency of lessons that I'm learning, that now that I'm like integrating, I'm starting to see the magic that happens from continually having that deeper sense of faith and trust, and then just practicing what I've learned so far in terms of what works.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like I've talked to a few people, lucky enough to interview a few special people on this podcast, and it's that common theme of I've asked, do you think it's the physical or the mental? And everyone says the mental. And it's easy to look at that as, yeah, sure, if you think it, it'll happen, but it's not just that, is it? It's knowing that you can do it. What have you accomplished before, whether it was that big or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does give you a lot of strength to keep going on and yeah, kind of dig
And
deep.
that's the importance of knowing your why. Like even today
Yeah,
on Instagram, I did my post about the run I recently did, and there was a girl on there that said, "Wow, you've really inspired me to do a half marathon next year."
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. But I wrote back to her and I said, she was a bit unsure, and I said, "I have no doubt you could do a marathon, but this is the importance of the why, right? Because I genuinely think, and this may sound extreme, but next to everyone has an ultra marathon in them, not just a half marathon, not just a
Hmm.
marathon, but an ultra marathon, because we have the ability in our mind. It might not look pretty, it
Yeah.
might be hard, but I do believe if you have a certain level of a physical foundation, and yes, you can improve upon that. And that's why I say know your why, because if you want to come first or you want to get a 3 hour marathon, okay, different story. But
Hmm.
if you just want to know what it feels like to finish something like this, I have absolute certainty that most people can get out there and do it. And again, it might not look pretty, it may be extremely difficult, but I can guarantee you one thing: when you cross that line, there is a sense of confidence of yourself that translates further than that finish line. It translates into your everyday life. And when you continue to do those things and prove to yourself that you've got more in you than what you initially thought or have expected, it just opens up a new way of living. And
Mm.
that's what I'm really passionate about. And that's what I do in my coaching as well. I have like a little bit of an angle where I like to help people that may be in sort of self-destructive behavioral patterns to be able to start focusing on adventure endurance, because I feel like it's a beautiful segue to place
Hmm.
that focus energy into something that's still hard, it's still difficult, um, but you're doing it in a way that's serving you and expanding who you are as a person, and you're feeling better because of it. You're surrounding yourself with like-minded, empowered people, and I see time and time again how much it works.
Hmm.
I've always been a mindset coach, so I do talk therapy to an extent. I think that's important, but the power of just getting into your body and out into nature, I've seen is so deeply healing. And all of us can do it right now. We all have the ability to get out there and get amongst that and be able to experience that. And I'm very passionate about experiences of anxiety and depression. I've had both. And it's just simple questions, right? Like, when was the last time you saw a sunrise? When was the last time you saw a sunset? When was the last time you got your feet on the ground? When was the last time you went walking through the bush? Like, these things, I feel like nature is its greatest healer, medicine
Mm.
to the soul. And when you're able to combine that with exerting energy in this form of environment that you may normally exert in binge drinking or promiscuity or emotionally eating, start framing it into a different focus. And I'm speaking from experience, not just something I've
Hmm.
read in a book, but from my own
Yeah.
experience of being able to take control of my life. These things work. These
Mm.
things absolutely work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of things are going through my mind as you're saying that. And one thing that kind of stands out is like you look at people like what actually popped in my mind was an NRL team who's been pretty special over the last couple of years, the Penrith Panthers. And they have won a lot of grand finals. And there's the coach has written a book and they talk about there the teamwork and that physical exertion of being a team and pushing yourself, but pushing each other. Similar to, I guess, like the Navy SEALs and people like that. They can go on to be so successful in anything in their life, and I think it's because they've built these foundations on physical strength. And I can push through that. I can push through the next challenge. Um, And
Absolutely.
I agree. I think we can kind of put these barriers up for ourselves. It doesn't have to be an ultra. It doesn't even have to be a
Mhm.
half, but it can just be getting out and appreciating that you can, do any sort of challenge, accomplish it, and build on it. Yeah,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think in line with what I was speaking to, like, because I know that particularly Australian culture, right, it is very heavy on the binge drinking, for example.
sure,
And I used to live there and I used to be in the corporate kind of realm. It was like, it was a thing. It was how you bond.
sure, yeah,
And
yeah,
it was quite difficult to move from not doing that and not having something to replace it. And so, speaking to what you're saying, you don't have to necessarily do an ultra marathon or a marathon or anything. But I found what was really useful is just being able to plan something really early on, like a Saturday morning. Set your alarm for 3:30. I found that's the sweet spot. That's the
mm-hmm,
thing, that not do anything the night before, because you got to get up at 3:30 to
sure,
go out to the mountains or something like that if you live in Sydney. And I feel like these things, it's a starting point for someone. You don't have to go all in straight away, but it's a starting point to be able to recognize that, okay, if I am unfulfilled or I'm not feeling good within myself in what I'm currently doing, let's try something new. And I
mm-hmm,
feel like this is a beautiful, easy step for you to start to explore a different way of living. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean you can't do these things now and then. But what I find with most of my clients is they're in this self-destructive cycle that they feel like they just can't get out of.
yeah,
And my job is to be able to give them a new idea of where to put this energy and focus
mm-hmm,
into, and just try it as a new way of life. You always can go back to your own life, but what
yeah, of
I find
course,
when you permission for that, it enables someone to make their own decision that, you know what, I'm not being forced to do this. I actually want to do this because I see how much more fulfilling this can be living
mm,
in this type of cycle
yeah.
versus something else.
Yeah, it's interesting you touch on the drinking and that kind of culture we have here in Australia. And one of my best mates is kind of been struggling with that this year and has taken a year off the drink. And he hasn't really replaced that habit or that outing or that social aspect with anything. And I saw something on social media and it was we're both into golf and we've been playing a bit of golf this year. And I said, I think for you not going out isn't going to fix it. You can go out, but I saw a really cool thing of booking a really early golf tee time, because then there's this kind of social excuse of, oh, I'm not staying out later, I'm not drinking, I've got golf in the morning, and it's something you want to do. It's great. Like I absolutely love being out on the golf course for that because they're beautiful. Like it's like an adult's playground. They're such beautiful places. And said that to him. I said, I think you should try and build that kind of routine in, and you won't miss the old life. You just appreciate the new one you're creating.
You have to be more excited for that new way of living.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to be able to have that community aspect. That's what I find.
Hmm.
If you do it all on your own, it's very difficult because it can be very real in that transition process, that if you stop going out, and which is normally involved with the drinking, you do not only miss that outlet of drinking, but you miss the social connection. And
Sure.
so it's so important to be able to not only have something to get up for, but make sure that it's something that you get that social connection and outlet
Hmm.
through, because that's just as important in being able to sort of stay on that path.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You touched on before that you've coached a lot of people. You've coached some high-level executives. What's one thing that they don't want to talk about, or what's something that leaders kind of shy away from?
Good question that they don't want to talk about. I try and get everything out of people.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Talk about, what do they not want to talk about? Um, I would say their fear.
Hmm.
I would say fear. I work with a lot of men. I work with a lot of high achieving men. And I
Yeah.
would say a lot of high achieving men have this perception that fear is weakness.
Hmm.
Admitting fear is weakness.
Hmm.
And I think that, because I work in the realm of self-destructive behavior, so to speak, a lot of this is just, or if not all, is a compensation for something
Hmm.
deeper.
For
And I
sure.
find that deeper sense of inadequacy is there, and not feeling like they can take off the professional mask and truly be themselves. And so when they come to me, and this is, I have something called integrated, which I call is like a confidential space for high achievers, is for
Hmm.
them to be to come to me and just like, I'm very blunt, I'm very blatant, like just lay it all out, like just
Yep.
speak out everything that you do not want to speak out to me. Let's do it, because then we've got something with. And I hold a very non-judgmental, very curious space, and I expect them to as well. And a very compassionate space. And let's work with what we're doing right now and where you want to go, and let's map out the journey of how to get there and what's in the way of that. And I find that to be one of the most beautiful spaces to work in, because I think, you know, men at times can be the backbone of families. And
Sure.
when they're off doing things that possibly aren't good for them, and the repercussions and consequences of that affect their family, it's huge. So I think that, yeah, it's very real that, and I think, you know, particularly in Australian culture, I think it's very evident. We have so many organizations now surrounding the encouragement of men to be able to speak up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing, is that resistance to being able to, you know, say that I'm scared, or things are tough, or I don't know what to do in this situation. Or a big one with high achievers, I feel like I'm in over my head. I feel like I'm in over. I feel like people see me a certain way, and I don't feel like that.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
having to keep the mask on and that perception as much as I can, but I'm like treading just like head above water consistently. And when
Yeah.
that happens, there's a level of breakdown that happens as well. So yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just being able to speak that fear.
That's interesting. Like, comes to mind is like the I guess the label of imposter syndrome, and it's I've felt that a lot in different roles I've had, and it's interesting to hear you say that, because I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't admit it. And I had a boss say to me once, he was like a publican, and he said, "Do you know why I wear long pants, Lachlan?" I said, "No, why?" He's like, "Because people can't see if my knees are shaking," and they are, so don't be worried if you feel in over your depth. And I went, "Yeah, that's really cool." I probably didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, there's a lot of lessons that man taught me, which I go, "Yeah, wow, he was really cool." Yeah. And
that's what
yeah.
helps people, is being able to be courageous and confident in being able to share. And, you know, my podcast is called To Be Human. I'm very passionate about it. It was founded from me having clients where I recognize, wow, we're all the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Those CEOs or those entrepreneurs that we look up to and we get intimidated by it, like, no, they're experiencing very similar things to you, just on a different level. And I think
Yeah.
it's been a very important lesson for me in the way that I relate to people, is being able to understand that we're all in this together. Just have different masks and ways of presenting ourselves to the world that are different. And some people are more honest and some people are more fearful. And I think no matter where you come from, to have that sense of compassion and curiosity is so important.
Have you found people that you've coached who have that kind of, I guess, hidden insecurities? Do they have a more dictator leadership style than others?
I think it's pretty well rounded. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
having different people in my head.
Yeah, sure.
I think some people are somewhat deeply empathetic because they're quite emotionally intelligent enough to understand that if they feel that way, then other people do too, and they have that
Cool.
sort of
Yeah.
more patience
Mm-hmm.
for people. I would also say that yes, there are some people that are a bit more dictatorship in the way that they lead, but again, it's just coming from that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always find it interesting, because I like to see the bigger picture in the way that, you know, of human psychology. And I always like to ask why rather
Mm-hmm.
than judge. And I genuinely don't believe that anyone has bad intentions. Everyone is just out there living a life of self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which we function around people, the ways in which we learnt when we were very young that worked best. And they may not necessarily be the most practical or humane ways of behaving now, but they are what we learn. And that's why it's important to have coaching, because I think or, someone to support you, a mentor, because you're able to bring a level of awareness and consciousness into the way that you behave now. And you're able to question, do I want to continue living my life like this and treating myself like this? Or possibly, is there a new way that I can step up and be a more evolved version of myself now, because I have the capacity to look after myself and protect myself?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I've got a hospitality background, and it's a lot of chefs I've worked with who have that kind of toxic masculinity trait, and it's this dictatorship, and it comes from, I have a lot of empathy as well, and can see two sides of the story and other people's perspective, and I can see it from there in that sort of environment. It's hot, it's dangerous, it's fast paced, they're long hours, it's exhausting. The money doesn't really it's not really, I don't know, on par for the effort you put in necessarily. But yeah, I think a lot of it is that it's actually coming from this place of they don't want to lose control, so they just have to kind of use this anger as a way to drive everyone. And I never find that gets the best results out of anyone. It
Yeah.
yeah, if anything, turns
But this
people
is
off.
where it's like that level of accountability and responsibility. It's like, yes, I can have empathy and compassion for the way in which you're behaving currently. But if you are in a situation where someone in your life that you at least possibly respect or is respected can bring a new level of awareness into your life about the way that you're behaving,
Mm,
now it's to be able to reevaluate. Like, now it is on you. And I
mm,
think, I have a very loving, soft approach to my coaching, but I also have a very stern approach to my coaching. And so once we bring that level of awareness, now it's time to pull your shit together
yeah,
and,
cool.
take it seriously.
Hmm.
And you have, you're powerful, right? You can choose to change in any moment. And so, yeah, I find in an environment like that, it's like, yes, I can see from the outside that this is what they've learned. And also, like, there is a level of accountability and responsibility that comes with becoming self-aware and realizing that if you're yelling at people or dictating people and you're not getting the results that you desire because of that, maybe it's time to reevaluate the way in which you're leading.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Um, how do you challenge your clients to face the parts themselves they don't want to see without giving away too many of your secrets?
um, I would say I don't challenge.
Hmm.
I would say I would just open up the space. What I've learned is the less pressure you put on someone at the start, the better. I
Hmm.
think sometimes go in too much with the paternal energy of like solutions.
Yeah,
And
okay.
what seems to work for me is coming in with a bit more of maternal energy of like just holding space, and
Mm,
let's just take our time and be in conversation. And it's like, at the end of the day, you're here because you want to be here. So we
yeah.
can sit here and we can not do anything, and you can remain the person that you are, that you're telling me that you don't want to be, and
Hmm.
you're doing the you don't want to do. We can do that.
Yeah.
Or we can choose to be we can choose to do something different, and that requires a depth of self-exploration, of facing things that you may not want to face, to be able to stop doing the things that you don't want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, and what I've found time and time again, also in my own life, is when I have done that, very quickly I realized the very thing I feared was a sensation, it was a feeling. And when I'm able to sit in that discomfort, what you soon recognize is that it passes.
Hmm.
And then once you're able to recognize, even for the first time, that you're able to sit through that very thing that you feared and sit with that discomfort, and it passes, it evolves, it transmutes, you're able to do it again and
Hmm.
again until eventually you build enough trust and understanding and experience that you're able to do it more and more until the divide between yourself and what you don't want to face becomes smaller.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
that's cool. That's really cool. I think I might have already said this on another interview. I know as a young man, I used to feel anger. That was my first emotion I'd feel all the time. It was anger. And the
Mm.
first couple of times I, exactly what you're saying, sat through that, it wasn't anger. There was another feeling there, but just the first response can be anger and frustration with the discomfort, right? But it's not. There's sometimes there's sadness, sometimes it's jealousy. Like it's not always anger. Sometimes it is. You kick your toe, you're not jealous of someone else's good toe. You're angry, but yeah, there's definitely some strength in, I guess, feeling it, feeling what's really meant to be felt, and what can you learn out of
Yeah.
that. Mm.
And I think it's important, and that's why I was speaking to the space of curiosity and non-judgment is I feel like in this day and age we've become very lazy and we judge very quickly.
Hmm.
And anger is a bad thing. And I'm really of like a proponent and advocate for very strongly now is to question all of it. Because I don't think this labeling and this compartmentalizing and categorizing um, is doing us any good.
Hmm.
I think we need to bring in a new sense of curiosity to everything that we experience because I feel like we are currently being bombarded with this, I would say, propaganda of this idea that we're all malfunctioning at a deep level. And it just
Mm.
blows my mind. I'm like, I don't believe that. I think that we're being told an untrue narrative and that actually we are functioning as natural as we ever could be, but we just haven't been informed about the way in which we can live in a world like this to our strength of who we are as human beings.
Hmm.
And so when we speak about anger or anxiety or depression, I come from the angle of these are all messages. And so if we were to sit with this anger or this anxiety or depression, begin to have a conversation with it, so to speak, what is your internal messaging and signaling
Mm.
actually communicating to you? Because what I've found is it's not telling you that you're malfunctioning, it's telling you that you're living a life of dysfunction. And it also tells you how to realign and live a congruent life that is for you, that will eliminate those uncomfortable feelings that we generally experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess as well to loop back to the, alcohol sort of thing or just different dependencies, it is always that kind of instant gratification of feelings of either you don't want to feel a certain way or you want to feel a different way. That's the easy option. And I think for most of us that is never the best solution. The easy option obviously ends up being the harder option in the long run. Um,
What we know is what we know, right? And when
mhm,
we're brought up in a society where this is a normal way to be able to live, we don't necessarily by default begin to question it until we realize that, hang on, I continue to do something that isn't necessarily making me feel better. And if anything, it's making me feel worse. And I know alcohol, for example, with me, what I enjoyed about it is that it gave me a level of relaxation and less stimulation.
mhm,
Um, Life was there's a lot always happening in life, and I felt like there was a level of relaxation that came from that. And it also expanded my social connection. When I did that, I was out, I was with
mm,
friends. And when I was starting to get clear on, okay, let's not think about alcohol as such, but let's think about what alcohol gives me. How can I experience those feelings or similar to those experiences, even in a way that doesn't utilize alcohol? And so
mhm,
that's how adventure and endurance has helped me because
mm.
getting out of nature and running for me is definitely a form of meditation and low stimulation and relaxation. And also, if I go out on a Saturday with a group of people in the mountains and we watch the sunrise, I'm also getting that deeper level of social connection.
Yeah,
And so,
cool.
gap or unfulfillment that I'm looking forward to cover it with alcohol, I'm doing it in different ways. But it sounds easy, but to
Mm.
most people, they don't understand that alcohol is not the problem. The problem
Yeah.
is what you're getting from the alcohol and being able to get it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that speaking to my friend, that's definitely something I've come to realize as well is that you can kind of demonize whatever your vice is. And it's not necessarily that vice itself, it's why are you reaching for that?
Yeah.
And what is it that you're searching for, And can you get it another way? Most of the time you can. Um, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. I feel like I feel like there can be people that can be skeptical about it or too overly identified with what it all means. And what I would suggest is just give it a go
Mm,
and see if it works.
yeah.
It does at least give it a chance.
Yeah, I did. Uh, not to sound creepy, but I did stalk your Instagram, and I saw you had a photo with Jordan Peterson, and he actually there's a something he said about that, which was he struggled with alcohol, and it was alcohol. He loved it, and it enhanced his social experiences and interactions, and alcohol wasn't the problem for him. It was why he was going to that, and that's kind of what was ringing in my head then as well.
Yeah. And that's where that level of radical self-honesty is very important. You got to
Mm-hmm,
get real with yourself to be
mm-hmm,
able to evolve. And so, yeah, I think that's an important step, is being able to truly face what it is that you are avoiding through
yeah.
alcohol. Yeah.
Now, feel free to skip this one, but what would you say is your biggest challenge in life?
Ooh, biggest challenge in life. Great question. I feel like my greatest challenge at the moment is I'm coming out of it, but this year has definitely been, as I said, the slowing down. I
Mm-hmm,
feel like I used to move really quick. I used to feel like I would have to be achieving all the time, otherwise I was wasting time.
mm-hmm,
And this year has been, I'm quite a spiritual person. I feel like it's been a forced stopping
mm,
of all that pattern itself. And being able to really just be with me, being able to recognize that when I slow down, the world still keeps moving.
mm-hmm.
I'm not at the forefront of that. And yes, of
Yeah,
course, what I do and what I contribute is important, but it's not the only thing that I'm here for. Um, to be able to really be confident within myself if I were to have no impact, I think, as well. And ironically, through these lessons, I've been able to learn that I'm actually coming out a lot more of a authentic
mm-hmm,
version of myself because of that,
mm,
um, because of that slowing down. So I would say that's my challenge, is to continue to remind myself as I feel like I'm coming out of that stage, to be able to stay um, delivering who I am from that place of deep authenticity, and not from more of that pattern of proving,
mm-hmm,
um, that satiates some sense of inadequacy, but to be able to really stay whole within me because I'm giving that wholeness to me, not
mm-hmm.
seeking it. Yeah.
Yeah, like quality over quantity sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty big. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Um, all right, now I wanted to ask you a few different bits about the run for Pete.
Yeah.
You've obviously traveled a lot. You've lived in 7 different countries, I think. Is that right? So you've seen a lot of people. You've seen a lot of different things. Thailand's obviously a pretty tough climate to run. If you could choose a country that would be tougher, what would it be?
Probably UAE, where I live.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway, Dubai in summer is pretty brutal.
I bet. What's the temperature? Just someone told me it gets up to like 60. Is that true?
Well, it can get to like 50, 55. Like, it's
Yeah, that'll do.
pretty
Yeah, that's pretty hot. Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. Like I
good. It's
definitely,
a training country though.
it's good. What? Sorry, trekking.
Training country.
Oh,
It's,
sure. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah. I've also spoke to a lady who was living over in Dubai, and she said they're actually so more advanced than we realize in Australia with just everything. Like if you want it, there's a service for it. There's all these different things, which she was telling me. I went, oh wow. It's like it really is a place of luxury.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating. You get so used to getting things within an instant here, of like
Yeah.
everything is in reach. Yeah, it's quite a fascinating experience.
Yeah. And you've been over there, you're saying, for a few months now. Do you think that
Yeah.
you'll, sorry, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I've been here for 6 months.
Yeah. And do you think you're there long term?
It's questionable. I love it here, and I told you, I'm quite an intuitive person. I'm an intuitive way. I live my life to intuition at the moment. The last probably 2 years, And so I move with my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now it feels right to be here. I don't know what next year looks like, or I guess
Sure.
feels
Yeah, yeah.
like. But I know that living here right now has been incredibly fulfilling. I've met amazing people. I've got deeper into my endurance sport. This is what got me to Oman recently, able to access Nepal a lot easier. So, yeah, we'll see. I would say the one thing that makes me question living here is the summer. It's
Yeah.
incredibly hot. Most people leave, and so I think next year, if anything, I possibly may go back to Australia or somewhere else, because I really begin to miss the greenery as well.
Yeah, sure.
Um, yeah, it's a different terrain here, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
loving,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly moments where I just yearn for the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, sure.
Go out there.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say
So
Dad's probably feeling the same where he is right now. He's not in Dubai in that heat, but it'd be pretty hot out there. I reckon he'd be missing the
absolutely.
northern beaches or the mountains. Yeah.
Exactly. You begin to think like that. And,
Mm-hmm.
I ran, it was quite hot on the Friday for me in this run. And it's just relentless. And so, yeah, when you speak about Peter, I really have like I feel for him. I have a deep sense of empathy, because when I was just one day running on the Friday, um, it was brutal. The heat, like it's very, especially when you're tired and you've already ran a long way, that
Yeah.
heat just absolutely zaps the energy out of you. You have to be so diligent with your hydration, and
Mm-hmm.
and keep um as cool as you can and everything, because even just those few hours I had left on the Friday, I was thinking I wouldn't be able to do this effort on the first day, because I already feel there's an air of heat stroke happening.
Yeah, sure.
So I feel for him. It's it not only is running 1,400 kilometers difficult, but when you put that air of heat into it,
Yeah.
um, it's it's tough. It's
Mm.
tough, and I in those circumstances as well, it accumulates over time, right? So if you're constantly running in that heat day in, day out, it's not just about how you feel on that day, but it's going to continue to accumulate over time. So, but I trust your father out of
Yeah.
anything. Super prepared. He's got an amazing team and support around him, and I have no doubt that he can do it. I'm very excited to hear his lessons and his journey, because
Mm.
can see on socials at the moment, he's already having a bit of a rough go, which we all knew would
Yeah.
happen this time he's out there, right? Is to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do something difficult in the spirit of what he is passionate about. Um, so I'm very excited to hear from him, and hear what, in these moments that I have no doubt he's going through right now, he's pulling on to be able to keep putting that step in front of the other, despite the heat and
Yeah.
despite the fatigue, despite the pain.
Yeah. Well, how do you think it like does it compare to the things you've done where he's got what is it? I don't want to say what day he's up to, but he's a few days in now, right? He's not even halfway. And that's got
Yeah,
to be playing a bit on his mind, right? It's day in and day
yeah.
out. First couple of days is always, I'm sure, I say always, like I've run anything like that in my life. I haven't, but I can imagine the excitement, all of that kind of adrenaline is good for a day or two. And then it starts to kick in. And then the reality sets in of, oh, we've got another 3 weeks still, you know?
Yeah, I think like I haven't done something that long, but I followed along with people that have.
Mm-hmm.
And I find what seems to happen is there is a huge kick up at the start, and then it kind of drops into this mellow kind of like people aren't as loud around you or supportive. And then it kind of kicks up at the end. And it's that middle bit that
Mm-hmm.
tends to swing a little bit for people. And I think that's when it can feel a little isolating and lonely. But I think that's one of the most important parts for someone like your dad, is to be able to really go there. Like that's the darkness, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
face, thing like that, when you feel like, I mean, he's already fundraised an incredible amount of money. And I think that that helps a lot in
Yeah.
doing something like this, is noticing that people are getting behind you. But I don't think that that's always enough. And I think that, yeah, because I definitely come from this angle of self-exploration in terms of adventure and endurance, I get excited, though it might sound a bit weird, like these in those moments that are the hardest, like that's when your dad is going to grow the most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think he knows that. right? So it's like, I feel like there's a difference in that, as well as like, you know, I have this saying that I use is like, when I want to give up is when I'm just getting started. And that's been really helpful for me, is like in those moments where, yeah, it might be even before you're halfway. I think mine on my run a few days ago, I clocked on it. I think it was 25.9 kilometers. I had my first, what the fuck am I doing here moment.
Yep.
And I was like, this is early.
Yeah, sure.
But again, because we create this level of resilience from past experiences, in my mindset, I was like, this is why I'm here. These moments where what the hell I'm doing here. This is when it's just getting started, Jennah. This is
Yeah.
when going into this self-exploration period of like, I don't know who I am or what I'm doing, but I'm here and I'm going to keep going and I'm going to learn on the go, and
Yep.
then be able to bring those new lessons and insights into my life. And I can certainly say, just in the last few days, there's certainly an integration period for it that I'm still going through, but it's like I already have this like newer sense, like a stronger sense of confidence in myself, because at 26 Ks I wanted to give up, but I got across the at 114. And so I have no doubt that your dad's gonna, you know, on a much deeper level, be experiencing something like that with what he's going through.
Yeah, I think it, like, kilometer after kilometer, I don't know if it's happening that frequently, but yeah, day after day for sure. And I think you're right. It's those moments of just changing your perspective of, for me, it would be kind of, all right, Lockie, the fun part's over. This is time to go to work. This is what it's really about. And to try and go, this is what it's about. These hard times are hard, and dive into it, feel it. But that's easy to say while I'm sitting here at home in the aircon.
Yeah, right. And that's why, you know, it's important for you. At the end of the day, I think, you know, we can have these sort of general ideas of mindsets that work and strategies. But I think what works the most is identifying what's really true for you. And so what works for your dad in moments like those might be very different to what works for you, what works for me.
Sure.
It's really important to be able to connect with those, because that's the fundamental thing at the end of the day. It's not someone else's why, it's yours, about
Yeah.
putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of motivation, like you said, raising the money, the charity, the kids at all the different homes. And there's a lot of motivation, but then there's moments where none of that's in his mind. It's just one foot in front of the other. And it's inside himself. Yeah. Where it's inside all of us, right?
Absolutely. And that sort of circles back to what we're saying, is I do believe, I say everybody has an ultra marathon in them, but what I more broadly mean is like everyone has so much more capacity in them than what they give themselves credit to. And I have a lot of resistance to people that say, oh, I can't do this, I wish I could do that. And I'm like, you can. Full, you can.
Yeah.
But you have to, and you have to choose it for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that these messages are very important, because I think even with what your dad's doing, it's like, from an outsider's perspective that may not be in that space, it's like, oh my God, look at, you know, that's impossible kind of thing, right? And it's like, I'm very passionate. You don't have to go and do that. But it's like, you know, what happens if you began to look at things like this as if they were possible? And even what would it look like if it was possible for you? How would you change the way in which you live now, in the idea that that was possible? What would the choices that you would make that maybe you would stop making as well, if you thought that it was possible for you? And I find when you start to kind of just flip it and entertain it, it gives yourself permission to possibly start living in a new way. And you might not do something that big or that perceptually great, but you will be living a life that's different to the life that you're living now, with that more expanded sense of self and capacity. And I always find that to be the most fulfilling, is who we are as human beings, is continually to self-explore and self-evolve, and be able to prove to ourselves that we're capable of so much more than what we currently perceive. You know, I think a lot of people in this day and age lack meaning and purpose, and there's a lot of strategies and coaching, you know, how to find your purpose. And I think just get out there and do something hard, and you'll start to get the answers from within. Don't worry about all the spreadsheets and all of that stuff. Like, go find it within yourself. It is there. And
Yeah.
it's not necessary to me to give you that answer, but for you to go find it yourself. But you can do that with added support.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
very, very inspiring. I don't know if you mean to be, but it's talking to me.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Now, I did want to know, how did you get connected with Hands? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so do you know what's interesting? So he just reached out to me recently because we both were getting coached by Maddie Abel. So
Oh,
shout
yep,
out Maddie
yep,
Abel.
yeah.
And Peter reached out and he's like, hey, like what you did with Mera Peak was really awesome. It was actually funny because he reached out and he's like, I'd love for you to speak about how you prepared for Mera Peak. And I sent back a laughing face and I was like, oh, that's hilarious because I'm a very intuitive traveler. And I decided to book Mera Peak 2 days before I went. And then 3 days later, I was in Nepal starting my trek.
Wow.
So there was a lesson in that about like, being physically and mentally prepared for anything. But
Mm,
what sort of circles back that's more interesting is that years ago, I used to be very involved in NGOs and I did a lot of volunteering in Kenya and India and Northern Territory and places like that. And so I was very passionate about reading sort of books on humanitarian endeavors and things like this. And I actually read his book years
right.
ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's really interesting when he reached out recently. I did a bit of a Google and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a really interesting kind of like moment
Yeah.
hearing that. I was like, I've read your book. Like, wow, like, putting it together. So it's really beautiful. And I think that's what happens, right? Is when you start to live this life of truth and you really begin to trust in sort of what you're pulled towards, no matter what your mind is telling you. It's like these synchronicities happen and these people like magnetize into your life that are really amazing. And I feel like the more and more I live my life the way that I'm living at the moment, the more incredible people are reaching out to me and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I feel really grateful and I feel very blessed. And to have Peter in my life, and particularly with what he's currently doing, is a huge inspiration to me.
yeah.
Um, yeah, very grateful to kind of had that full circle moment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's very cool.
Mm.
I think that as well is a common theme I've had with talking to people, is being open, being true to yourself is I guess particular specific to you in this chat, which is really cool. But it's that whole thing of being open and not closed off, and you never really know what's going to hop up. And if you are a bit scared, then you'll say no to new things. And if you're open to it, it's a little bit like at the moment I'm looking for jobs and trying to find a new path. And I thought, just trust the process. Like I'm not getting as many bites as I would have liked. And in the past, that would make me quite nervous. But I am trusting that the right thing is going to come out, and talking to different people. And yeah, like I think that to being true to my own values of what I want, it might not be instant and it might not be, yeah, I might have to just kind of sit in this for a little while, but I know what I want and I know that that will come. I just don't know how yet. Yeah.
And that's the faith aspect, I think, is like whether you believe in God or the universe or anything, is that faith aspect that when you fully are able to surrender your control into the unknown. And it doesn't mean not doing anything, but as I said, sort of living more of that life to that intuition and gut level. What I found in my own life is that these opportunities and synchronicities come out of nowhere. And so you begin to live your life in less of a linear fashion and more
Hmm.
of a quantum level, I
Yeah,
suppose, where
yeah.
it's just I've had some really interesting experiences this year. I myself quit some certain contract roles because of differences of values. And, one of them within few minutes, an opportunity got
Mm,
sent straight away. Within few minutes, it just popped up. And I thought, it's interesting. I feel like you get rewarded, but you
yeah,
can't have, what I've learned is you can't pretend to have faith in the expectation of the reward. You
sure.
have to really sit with that full sense of surrender and sit with the discomfort of the unknown and the
Hmm.
idea that, oh my God, if I don't get a job, I could be out in the street kind of surrender. And then when you fully trust, that's when things start to come in. But
Yeah.
you can't pretend or fake it,
Hmm.
is what it has to be that really like, and I call it like getting on your knees moment is like sometimes life will test you and you got to just get on your knees and fully surrender and say, you know what? Like I've got nothing left other than fully trusting in this moment, and I'll continue to live my path. But I'm going to trust in this moment in time where life is for you, Lockie. It's obviously redirecting you, and I
Hmm.
find when life directs you, this is my belief, it's always redirecting you onto the path that is most true to you. And so it's not always easy, but it will, in the end, in hindsight, you'll be able to look back and be able to connect the dots and make sense of why everything happened the way that it happened. But I find the more resistance you have to an experience like that, the more difficult it will become, because life's going to keep trying to push you onto a certain way.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think someone said to me, it's easy when you're feeling like that. And obviously, everyone needs to pay their bills. And it can get to that point of fear can control you. And you go, I'll just take something. And you know it's not right. You feel it in your gut, but you take it because you're nervous. Or it's easy to live in that fear of like, I need to kind of make money. I need to find a solution, but you know it's not right. And it ends up you're kind of in this circle then of, you're not happy, you don't feel happy, you look for something else, you get scared, and then you're just back in that circle. So trying to find a way out of that is not always easy, but it's definitely, I think, trusting it, and it'll, I guess, take us in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think this is about what I've learned is starting to practice really living to that intuitive gut level way of living. I have this thing in my coaching where I say congruence is power, and what congruence is living in alignment with who you truly are. And I believe we're all sort of born with this unique energetic signature, and there's this constant way that we can live in terms of realigning continually. And so it's like being able to be so deeply connected with that inner signaling, that it becomes this very easy way of living because you trust the most in that feeling. And I think, when we spoke about anxiety and depression and things like this, and when I spoke about the signaling, it's about getting the messages so that you can realign in your deeper sense of truth. And when you do that, that's when I feel like the magic happens. That's when I feel like the synchronicities happen, the opportunities come in, you meet a certain person, and it's like the sliding doors moments. And yeah, that's what I've really seen, is that the people that tend to live more logically and tend to analyze rather than feel, most of them I find are a lot more unfulfilled and are quite disconnected from who they are. And I believe most of them at some point in their life, generally it happens later, you hear of midlife crisis and things like
Sure.
this. It gets to a point where they have to question everything that they've believed in and the way that they lived. And then they start living more true to them. But I think I would encourage, for as young as they can be, to start doing it now and live a life true to them for as long as they can in their life, as early as they can.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Look, I know we've been chatting for a while, and I could keep talking for a lot longer, but I know you've got things to do. So I wanted to kind of finish on if you had a last piece of advice for anyone who's looking at doing a challenge like this, or who's already doing a challenge like this that people are taking, and yeah, like what advice would you have for people like that?
I would say the most important thing that I've learned in relation to taking on any sort of challenge is to do it for you first and foremost. I think that's the most important thing. I think we live a life where we're brought up to not trust ourselves and to continually look outside of ourselves for our own sense of self-worth, and reassurance. And so I would find, in terms of these challenges, use it as an opportunity to start coming home to yourself and remembering who you are and what you're capable of. And don't be distracted by other people's perceptions or expectations of you, or you trying to prove your own sense of self. Come back to you. I had a WhatsApp group for this run. The first time I've done it, I put all my friends and some family in there. And I was audioing sort of throughout it to keep them updated. And I said, someone's like, you're coming fifth in the women or something. And I said, I don't really mind about that. Like, it's not why I'm out here doing that. I'm not competitive like that for this one. And my mom wrote something really wise. She said, you're the most competitive person I know. She goes, but you're the most competitive against yourself versus yourself. Really landed for me. And I thought, she's right. I am. When I am running out here, it's not for anyone else but myself. And I'm fiercely doing that for me. So I would challenge people to do it for you, and do it in the spirit of finding out who you truly are when, where we started, right? When everything is stripped bare. Who are you really? And what are you truly capable of? Do it in the spirit of that and see where that leads you. Because I think it's the most powerful way of approaching things like this, because it creates the least distraction and the most focus on you, which is very important when it comes to things like this.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like a really good recap of the whole podcast, really. Like that's it. Just be true to yourself, hey.
Just do it
Love
for
it.
yourself. And it sounds easy, but it's not always easy because
Absolutely.
other people. But I think, again, a huge part of my messaging is being able to bring these lessons that we learn in these challenges into our everyday life. And don't just do a challenge that you're going to do, but do it in life. Do everything that you do for you. And that doesn't mean be selfish, because I think when we live our truth, it's not in the spirit of selfishness. It's in the spirit of what is true for us and why we're here. And I think that at the fundamental level of all of that is for our own sense of fulfillment and for our own sense of connection and contribution with others. And so, yeah, I would say, in the spirit of the challenge, I would challenge them to be able to approach it from that headspace and that heart.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us all. And there's a lot there, a lot of great lessons. And yeah, it was really great chatting to you. What's your next adventure?
I appreciate you as well.
Oh,
Thank you so
thank you.
much for holding this space. It's been really lovely.
My pleasure.
Next adventure, it's always the question.
Yeah.
They have an ultra marathon here in just outside of Dubai, in a place called Jebel Jais, which is massive mountains. It actually has more elevation than the run I just did. I
Wow.
won't do the 100, but I am possibly thinking about doing the 50 or 70 at the end of January. It depends how the body goes. I want to be smart. My mind gets excited. Even my heart, I would say, but I want to do things properly. But I think that's something that I'd love to be a part of. I think this run recently has set a beautiful foundation for me, fortunately, to get through something like that. It makes a lot of things seem easier. And I think that's one of the funnest parts of doing these different things is crazy things start to feel normal. So yeah, that's the next adventure. I haven't got anything planned after that. I do want to go back to Nepal. I'd love to do possibly something called Island Peak, maybe Luboche, I think it's called, Luboche, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, bring in some climbing, not just sort of like
Cool.
climbing, but
Yeah.
we'll see. As I said, I'm quite intuitive. I might say I don't know anything, and then tomorrow you might see me back in Nepal on top of a mountain.
Love it. Yeah, so cool.
That's maybe where I want to end that final message, is that I think when you begin to create this strong level of physical foundation and you begin to accumulate the knowledge, experience, and insight that you have from adventure, endurance, and any form of challenge, build yourself in a way that you can go and make a decision last minute and go do something great. I think that is a beautiful way to live. And as I've shared, I'm not a high performer. I'm not coming across the finish line first. This isn't what it's about. I want to speak to everyone in the way of what's possible for us all when we just do it in the spirit of adventure.
Love it. Well, good luck on your next adventure, and everyone else out there, hope you're inspired. Yeah,
Lots of love,
love it.
everybody.
Love it. All right. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.